Redditors with real-life, butterfly effect stories, what happened and what was the series of events and outcomes. Nearly every single friend I have in college is because one day in my Gen Ed health class we had to pick a seat that would become our seat for the semester. When I came in there weren't many seats left, and the people I sat next to ended up becoming my best friends and introduced me to all of my other friends in one way or another. My coworker has a big ego and thinks she knows best. We had a patient who received home visits. He had a medical condition that, if observed by a newcomer, might cause alarm, but we were very much informed about it and familiar with it. Instructions were that the condition was normal for him, not a concern in itself. One day the patient's wife and my coworker seemed to have some kind of power struggle, disagreement about his condition and treatment, and the coworker ended up calling an ambulance for his long-term unchanged condition that we were very familiar with. He was taken to hospital and while there caught an infection. This infection impacted his eating and he lost a lot of weight fast. His condition deteriorated over the next few months and he passed away. Honestly, it wasn't unexpected that he might pass, but it seems the specific scenario it ended up happening in stemmed from that unnecessary hospital visit. I'm alive because my aunt was born. My grandfather was conscripted into the Romanian army as a medic, and his unit was one of the many acting as a defensive barrier, covering the supply lines to Stalingrad. She was born, and he was called back to Bucharest from the front. While he was on leave, the Russians launched Operation Uranus, which decimated the Axis forces. He received word that his unit had been completely destroyed. He was never reassigned, and in 1948, my mother was born. I'm also alive because a bunch of Romanian cows got sick. My other grandfather was a pharmacist, back when that meant actually making medicines. He was also a Jew. The town he lived in was largely agrarian, and the cow herds came down with some illness that was killing them. He whipped something up that cured them. The townspeople were very grateful to him, so grateful that when the chief of police heard that they were coming to town to take inventory of who lived there, he came to my grandfather's house with some train tickets for him and his wife. They escaped and never got caught. My father was born at the end of 1945. I guess this is the opposite of the butterfly effect, really, rather than one small action blowing up into a much more important chain of events. Two hugely improbable events eventually lead to my birth and obviously my extended family as well. And now, I run ads on the internet. Grew up speaking Spanish, so in high school my mom made me sign up for French. I didn't really care, but figured whatever, at least it's something new. I was a good kid. Bit of a cut-up with absolutely zero direction. In that class one met a girl and we sort of became friends. She got sick that year. Cancer. It was horrible. Visited her in the hospital. Got close to her family, still am. She passed the following year. French, it turns out, was her favorite subject and her dream had been to study abroad. Her parents asked if we, her friends from that class, could do that for her. The years went on. I worked every summer, tried to save up to study abroad. I noticed the others who had made the promise weren't making moves towards it, so I worked even harder. Finally went for a semester my third year. TBF, I always enjoyed French, but it wasn't a passion. Except that semester something kind of shifted. Came home, finished undergrad, then got into a master's in French. The whole time my friend's mom is excited, feeling like my friend is somehow vicariously living through me. I graduated from my master's and then moved back to France. Been here 3 years now, and May 1st was the 11th anniversary of my friend's death. As I type it out, it's not so outwardly obvious, but the entire time it's been so clear for me that she's been with me on this journey. High school. I didn't get into the app history class wanted. Changed up my schedule, including a different gym class. Without everyone I knew, I was heartbroken. I really wanted to teach. And without an app class senior year, I was screwed. Made a new friend in gym class, who was wearing a volunteer firefighter shirt. He had just joined, seemed interesting, and he invited me to check it out. They paid for me to get my EMT. Fell in love with healthcare. Fast forward quite a while, and I'm an nurse and precept students and new nurses, teaching them how to survive in the I also do public outreach and injury prevention, and I love it. Glad I missed out on my class. If my biological mom hadn't asked her parents to watch me for a couple hours and then left town, I wouldn't have had the incredible and privileged life that I was given through adoption. My younger half-brothers were raised by our biological mom and they are a total freaking mess. I'm more of a mom to them than their actual mom. And I would have been an absolute wreck also if she'd kept me. Instead I was given an amazing private education, all the sports and musical adventures, and most important a healthy, loving home with two parents who taught me that just because you share blood doesn't mean you love, and just because you didn't give birth to a child doesn't mean you can't be their parent. Wait, were you adopted by your grandparents or given up for adoption? Adopted by my grandparents. Basically, she dropped me off and said she'd be back in 2 hours. 2 weeks later my parents' grandparents knew she wasn't coming back. They drafted up adoption papers, tracked her down several states away, and sent her the docs to sign. She signed and sent them back. No conversations had, and they were my mom and dad from then on. I was young but kind of remember bits and pieces of it. I was going out to grab pizza and a case of beer for me and my roommate, but he texted me that he had a stomach thing. So I walked to a restaurant and ordered dinner at the bar and met a girl there, and now we are married and have 2 kids. I was walking to school and got distracted by a hedgehog that ran in a bush next to me, then a big tree branch fell in front of me. Would have crushed me if I didn't get distracted by a spiky little mouse scurrying in the bushes. I gave him a dead cricket the next day. He took it and ran off. Godspeed, spiky mouse. The wife and I were having dinner in Hawaii one night on vacation. As we were getting up to leave, I noticed she hadn't finished her beer. I told her she should finish the beer since we paid some ridiculous price for it. Fast forward 30 seconds and we leave the restaurant and are walking the 3 blocks back to the hotel. About 50 feet in front of us as we're walking down the sidewalk on the left side of the road. A car comes flying out of a side street from the right and crosses through the street, hops the sidewalk in front of us, and smashes into a wall. If she didn't finish her beer, we would have been smoked by the car and most likely squished between the car and the wall. We always finish our beer now. Pregnant cousin usually takes the bus at around 5:10 p.m. after work. She was about to hop inside the bus but she needed to pee really badly and the commute is about an hour long, so she decided to go to the restroom instead and just catch the next bus. That 5:10 bus ended up falling from a cliff. At the end of 6th grade, my class took a field trip on a whale watch. That night, I saw a commercial for a documentary TV series on whales. Ever since that day, I wanted to grow up and protect whales from being hunted. Today I work in the military specializing in marine preservation. Longer version. I was just out of high school and new in town with no job. I was living off what savings I had left and my account went below zero without me knowing. I was overdraft charged like 10 times and owed $300. I went down to the bank, spoke with a teller, and she ended up being a lifesaver. She worked with me and got all the charges removed. On top of getting the charges removed, we got to talking about my situation and she said that her son worked at a local restaurant and she would help me get a job. She was a woman of her word and by the end of the week I was working full time. Fast forward, I meet a cool dude who worked there. We became friends. I introduced him to my sister. They fell in love, got married and had 2 kids. His best friend came into town for the wedding and I introduced him to my roommate at the time. They fell in love, got married and had 2 babies. I also got my best friend a job at the restaurant where he met a girl working there. They fell in love, got married and had a kid. Right before I left I got my roommate a job at the restaurant, where he met a customer, fell in love, got married and had a kid. As a bonus, my best friend, who I helped get the job, repaid the favor and got me a job at a different restaurant, where I met a girl, fell in love and got married. Received an incredibly high-paying job offer to run our biggest competitors' team. Told my boss, even though I loved my job, but it was more than double what I was making. Boss agreed to a reasonable raise. Still not near the offer. I decided to stay because I genuinely loved my team, co-workers, and the money wasn't enough to leave that happy place. In exchange, I had to take up another account that meant a business trip I didn't have in the plans. Went on that trip and met my future husband. Couple of years later, we went on our honeymoon at a new resort in St. Lucia. Ran into someone I knew from work. Turns out, the team that I'd been given the job offer for had made so much money that they had booked the same resort to celebrate. I sat there and went, wow, life is nuts. Would have ended up there. Either way.